Hey, I'd love to welcome Neil Maguire here to the channel. Hi, Neil.
Hello. Hiya. Hello.
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me about this. You have worked on a huge variety of projects, everything from, I was blown away to see that you were the one who did the storyboards for the the SS Callister episode of Black Mirror, everything from that to, well, there's a big Paddington 2 on your wall. So
yeah.
And of
There's
course,
a few of those.
most notably for our purposes, you've been working on Supermassive Games for quite some time as a storyboard artist. So I was wondering if you could start off, could you go into a little detail about storyboard artistry? What is it you do? What is your role? When do you come in on a job?
Right. Okay. Well, firstly, hi Dan. Thank you for having me. The storyboard is we get called in very early. The script, as you know, and so on, is there and ready. A lot of the time, it's still being worked on, depending on how early we get pulled in, and it's very much the same. It's kind of the same with games as it is with film and TV and all that sort of thing. You get your script first, and then you'll discuss what it is that you want to see, and how the overall project, be it a game or a film or etc., is going to look, and then a storyboard artist's job is to basically visualize the script with all the beats and to reference any particular type of effect, if it's live action, etc. And really, so it's a cheap way of seeing the end product without having to film or render. So we basically represent the entire game from beginning to end, or various parts of the film, etc., in a sort of almost like a comic book kind of style of panels, which are incremental and show basically what's going to go on. And that's the job of a storyboarder, which is, I've been doing it a long time now, since before the internet almost. Yeah, dark ages or what? And I still love it. I still love it. Every day. It's just fun.
Well, I mean, you make an interesting point there about it being similar to comic books because you're essentially visually telling the story. You hear things like how Mad Max Fury Road, they didn't even use a script. He just commissioned an entire book of storyboards for every shot in the entire movie.
Yeah.
What is the most number? Like, what is the biggest storyboards you've ever had to do for a movie?
That really does depend. Some first-time directors will want almost the whole movie done, and then you could be anything up to 2,000 boards. A lot of the time with films, it's a little bit less than that, because you'll be doing sequences and everything. But the first film I ever worked on, which oddly enough never got made, which is a real shame, was a film with the classic title of The Frozen Four back in 1990. But at the time, I was reading a book about The Empire Strikes Back, and they were boasting that they had 550 storyboards on there, and I thought that's a lot of boards, and I'd done 1,763, and there were still changes being made, and so it was still being redone. So it really does depend, and on a game especially, or for an animated project, a game especially, you can be on a game for a year, and you will do tens of thousands of boards.
Oh wow.
Over that time period, because there's so much of it. You're doing the game from beginning to end, all the different branches, all the little nuances as well, and the script changes, as you know, and all that. So it's always a really good fun. I mean, I got into gaming in the early 90s quite by accident. I'd been working in film since 1990, and I went to my local pub, which was a ghastly place. It was quite fun. It's where everyone met up to go somewhere good. It was one of those pubs.
Okay, yeah.
It was one of those pubs. But I was
centrally located, and that's all it had going for it.
Yeah, that's it. Well, I was in there one night, and so because all the good places were full, and I was having a beer with a couple of friends, and I tripped over a guy's dog, and it was a beautiful blonde Alsatian. No, it wasn't an Alsatian. Can't remember the name. Labrador. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Forgive me. And it was a Labrador. And it was really, really gorgeous. And I got up and I tripped over his tail and everything. I said, you're okay. I ended up chatting to the guy whose dog it was, and his name was Fergus McGovern. And he ran a claim.
Wow.
Yeah. And so he said, what do you do? And I explained what I did. And they said, we need some storyboards for a game. Would you be interested? And it went from there.
Oh my God.
And so he said, come in and take you for a tour around the around the offices and everything, show you what needs to be done. And it was interesting because it turned out that it was a very similar approach to film, to boarding the games. And a little Fergus sadly passed away a few years ago, only a young guy, about 50. Shocked absolutely everyone. But one thing he never knew was on the day I was asked to come up and have a look around the studios, I didn't know where to park. So I parked in the visitors' bay at the front of Nolly House in Croydon, where it was, and it was a windy day, and I parked next to, I think it was a Ferrari, a very expensive red Ferrari, and I went to open the door of my car, which is a little sort of tin box thing like that, and the wind blew it, and the door slammed into the Ferrari's side, so I closed it and pulled into another parking space. So no one ever knew that until now. That's a Highlander line, isn't it? So I went in there, and it sort of went from there, and it was, what was really good fun was, apart from the fact it was a very different era in gaming, it was very fresh and new and exciting, and it wasn't quite as corporate as it later got. Yeah. A lot of the work practices you wouldn't allow now.
Really?
It was well, I mean, you should go off for long lunches, shall we say. And coming back, and there was quite a party atmosphere around the place, because it was mainly young people, and it's very intensive amounts of work, and the colleagues became your friends, they became family, so you would be doing sort of 12, 15 hours a day at work. Wow. So it was quite rock and roll in that respect.
And everyone was excited to be making video games.
Yeah, exactly. And lots of parties and, and really good fun. And the first sort of game I really got stuck into was the original Die Hard trilogy on PlayStation 1.
Wow.
And that's going back so many years. But my little claim to fame was I'd got some stunt training beforehand from another project and everything. So I used to do all the motion. I did all the original motion capture for that. So I was literally everyone in the whole trilogy.
Wait! In the game Die Hard trilogy, I've played this game. Yeah, where there was the car game and the shooting game and the running around the thing. You did the motion capture for all of those.
I was everyone from female hitchhiker to Bruce Willis.
Wow.
And it's a weird thing, because I subsequently did quite a bit more motion capture. But one of the weird things is when you see a character that because you don't necessarily think of the way you move, because you move all the time, until you see it represented on screen, but someone else is wearing you, if that makes sense. Because
that must be disorienting.
It is. It's weird. Like in the first one, I didn't realise I lolloped when I ran with a gun down by my side. Yeah, I've got a strange gait. And I'd never really picked it. Obviously, I don't run around with guns, and I hadn't really noticed it, But so that was a sort of a kind of really fun trial by fire, and I was with them for a long time, and about 3 years, and then went back into film and television, and then because I was aware of games and how much fun they were to work on, I kept working
dipping your toes back in.
Platform. Yeah, or whenever I could, so I never really, although I sort of left games to a certain extent, I was always being called back in to work on different projects for different companies. And so I worked on every platform right up until, with SMG, with all the Dark trilogy, the Dark anthology games and everything.
I saw that you worked, I have to ask, I saw on your website, in your sample page, that you worked on Constantine.
Yes.
How did that happen?
I just got a phone call. It was one of those, someone knew someone had seen me work on something and thought he's cheap, and gave me a call. And I remember the offices were in Cricklewood. Now, I don't know if in Canada people are aware of there was a series called The Goodies, which was it was like a live action comic, is the only way to describe it, in the 70s, and with these three characters and it was a big sort of smash hit in the UK back at that time, and it was being repeated all the time. And the character's head office was in Cricklewood. Oh. So I went to Cricklewood hoping to see, some kind of, part of my childhood played there again. But it wasn't. It was just Cricklewood, which isn't, it's not the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, I'll be honest. They gave me the script, and they said, here's a script, and it looked quite thin for the movie. And they said, we're making a game of this. It's all very early days. Here's a script of the movie. Can you have a quick read of it before you come into the meeting? I was like, yeah, okay. It was, like I said, it was fairly thin. I didn't realise that they'd printed on both sides, which is why it was so thin. So I had to speed read this thing because the film wasn't out there, Yeah. And that was a really nice project to work on. because we don't make that many sort of horror films as such in the UK.
Right.
So there isn't all that much horror work about as such, and I get lots of family-friendly entertainment projects and bits and pieces like that. But I love horror.
Yeah,
I always have done since I was sort of 10 years old and watching the original Evil Dead and all that. So it was great fun, and they gave me this brief and they said, we want these scenes. We're not quite sure how they're going to work out, but obviously you're looking at the parameters of the technology at the time as to what you can and can't do, and you make sure if we do these shots, are they doable? And they said, yeah, go for that. So I worked on that for I don't know how long it was now. It was probably 2-3 months on that. And I was always blown away. Constantine is one of those films that not all that many people have seen, but it's really innovative.
Yeah.
As a movie, it's really good film.
Visually incredible. Their depiction of hell as this city where there's a constant firestorm and all of the cars flying past all that. The way they did it in that game was quite impressive. Like, it looked great in the movie, but the way they turned it into a game is very memorable. Yeah, I did play and review that one at the time, and it stuck with me.
Yeah, I mean, it still stands up to this very day. Obviously, the graphics are a little bit raw, but it's it was a lovely project to work on, and I was always impressed by the designs. And that's one thing that I have to say with games is I never cease to be stunned by the talent of, especially like the concept stuff and the creative side of it, because I was their age when I started. Now I'm old, and I'm seeing these youngsters. Hello, my dear. Tiny. And I'm thinking, how could you have so much talent and be so young? But it's not a reflection on them. It's just me getting old. But I'm blown away. I'm absolutely blown away, especially on especially with some of the SMG stuff I saw. Was just looking at this stuff and you think, I'd have these concept designs framed and on a wall, just glorious.
Well, you said you loved horror, and is it all factored into your love of horror, the fact that you do get to do some of the more visually interesting things? Like, it's more creative stuff to draw than, not to criticize other things you've worked on, than Talking Vans, for example.
Oh, don't. Yeah, no, I remember that show with such fondness. The thing is, I'm not you can either specialize or you can specialize and generalize, and I tend to specialize and generalize because I've had a lot of experience in all of it. And there's only so much sort of you can get from preschool to a certain extent, whereas there's so many just visual minds that you can go down with horror and with the creepier stuff. That's where the absolute delight comes from, because you'll be given a fairly loose brief sometimes, and your mind is going 100 miles an hour, thinking, right, we can do this, we can do that, we can do this, and then you okay it. Is this possible? Is this within the remits of the technology? Is this fitting in with the story and the game? Why don't we try this? And there's still that creative freedom in gaming, because at the end of the day, although yes, it's all about finances, people want to make a good product. So everyone. It is
interesting because, it is the realm of the, completely fantastic imagery, right? Horror, all of the blocks are off, like all of the restrictions are gone. You can do pretty much anything you want in horror because it is about surprising and shocking people. And I have to imagine that, as you said, that's incredibly freeing for you.
Yeah. I'm old school in some respects, that I do believe in an old adage, which is hide it in light, hide it in shadow. So you don't necessarily need to show what the threat is. You can intimate at it. You can work off reactions of people. You can build up tension so much more powerfully than if you just introduced your main character, because then you just you've got something that everyone's seen. Oh, right, it's that, and then you're done. When you look at all the proper, really creepy, horror, scary films, the ones that are intelligently directed, not the popcorn. Popcorn ones are fun, but when you look at some of the proper ones, you won't see the main protagonist for a long time. But the scares are all there, and I was sort of brought into. I still get brought into games because of my cinema background. Because they want it to look filmic.
Of course.
And that's great because a lot of games and so will have an awful lot of things thrown at them, but when you cut to a cutscene or an FMV, it can be a bit of a mess, and irrespective of the size of the game, AAA game, you can look at the cutscenes and you think, Jesus, what happened here? So it helps to play, to come into that, and so I still approached games as I do with live action. What do we need to see? What don't we need to see? Let's have the camera moving around here. Let's build up the tension. Let's work off reactions. Let's go for this, that, and the other. With Foley, with sound, the sound of a scraping chain following you down a corridor is way more scary than, something being scraped on concrete or something behind you and you've got dripping shadows and, this. That's, you're building up and ratcheting up the tension there way more than if you see the killer or the monster or whatever it is straight away. So I thoroughly enjoy that whole process of building the scares. And if anything, games are more open to suggestion than features.
No,
they seem to have crossed over now.
It does make sense that you can do, because the player is in that world, right, and experiencing it for themselves. There's a lot more you can do to terrify them. Especially with surround sound.
Yeah, there was a game called Dead Space.
Of course,
remember that? Yeah, and the audio on that is so creepy.
Yeah,
even if you're standing in the corner and you're not doing anything,
the hum of that ship is so ominous all the time.
Yeah, and the dripping water and the bits and electric and stuff like that, and it really builds up the creeps, and you haven't done anything.
So you play. You do play the games as well. You be like a lot of these games, you enjoy digging into yourself.
Yeah, I think is I don't get a chance to play as many games as I'd like, usually because I'm too busy. But I love playing games. The thing is, I'm not very good at them. I never have been. I go online and I'm just killed instantly by 7-year-olds around the planet before I even picked up the blaster. I'm just. But I must admit, some of the graphics that I saw, especially for things like Quarry, when I saw the trailer, you almost don't know if you're watching a video game, or a film.
It looks incredible, which I think brings me to the real question, the big question, which is, you love horror, you love its possibilities, you're obviously passionate about video games. How did you end up hooking up with Supermassive Games? Because you've worked on a lot of their projects.
Yeah. I literally got a call, a very polite call from one of the guys there, and he said, "Would you be interested in this project?" And it was getting towards the end of the year, and they wanted me sort of in house for about 3 months, and I'm not sure if I really want to get tied down on that because of the time of year it was. So I was a little bit reticent, and I spoke to Penny, my wife, and she said, "Well, this is getting to the quieter part of the year now. That'd be good to do, and you like games, so give it a bash." And so it was really just a case of that. I had to sort of talk over it. First of all, I wasn't too sure if I wanted to get involved in that particular one. No, I didn't know SMG at the time, and I'm really glad that I did.
What was the first one you worked on this one?
Well, it was a game that got pulled actually. Yeah, and. I'm trying to think of the title to it. It was a sequel game, and it wasn't a horror. It was a procedural. And I was on that for about 3 months. And they said, "Look, this game has been pulled," because it happens, I worked on games in the past, things like Spirit Master, which would go on for ages and then get pulled, and this was in a very early stage. And they just said, "No, it's gone away."
Would it be Hidden Agenda 2?
That's the one. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. And so they said, "Look, you've got more time still allocated to you working with us. We've got a new game. Would you be interested?" And I said, "Yeah," because I'd sort of sat in house with them for a couple of months, and just a lovely, lovely team, really, And so they said, "Well, this is a horror game." I was like, "All right, yeah, lovely, lovely." And it was Little Hope.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That was the first one you worked on. The first Dark Pictures game you worked on.
Yeah, first Dark Pictures one that I worked on. And they said, would you come on board? And basically the brief was really, really loose, a smashing team. And they just said, "Look, this is what we want you to do. This is the sort of idea we've got. The team sat around. We've come up with this idea. Here's a sort of script to lay out, kind of. Work with it and have fun with it. And I think in the space of 3 days, I'd sort of drawn wiping out an entire family in sort of various different ways. And it was like, wow, this is full on. And it was just so much fun. And I was on that for about 9, 10, 11 months, something like that.
Wow.
And it was great. And that went from that game. They said, "Oh, we've got another one in the anthology now. Are you happy to work on there?" And so that was, I believe, that was House of Ashes. And then from there was the Architect, Hyde Assins. There was another one as well, which was an intermediate one. And if I can just open that, I can find out which was the other game.
Architects of Murder, of course, wound up being called The Devil in Me.
The Devil in Me, yes. That's it, yeah. Little Hope, House of Ashes, and Architect were the three that eventually went on. And then after that was the Quarry. And each one of those games I was on for a long time. House of Ashes was particularly nice visually. Because I hadn't seen anything done like it before. These vampire creatures underground. With hints of a film you probably know, Dan, because you're a bit of an aficionado. But there was a wonderful '80s film called Life Force.
Oh, I adore Life Force with the space vampires and
yes, so much
what's
better
his
than the
name
book.
From MI5 or Spooks? Yeah,
yeah, I can never. I can't remember his name.
Peter something. Anyway,
but yes,
such a good movie, Life Force.
It is. And if no one's seen it, it's bonkers.
Yes, it is. It is a crazy
It was Dan
movie.
O'Bannon, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Return of the Living Dead fame and everything, and was asked to, script that up and work on that. And it's mad.
If you went and looked,
Toby Hooper,
Toby Hooper directed that. Yeah. The Tom Cruise Mummy movie is basically just a remake of Life Force. Because it's got this ancient woman just strolling around London and sucking the life out of people. It's very similar to it.
What's interesting though about Life Force is I like it because it was all pre CGI, of course, because it was 1985.
Of course.
So they had to work out how to do all the effects practically. So you've got these amazing 6-foot animatronic creatures coming to life. You've got scenes of destruction and devastation. I know that one of the scenes in London, which showed London collapsing, they didn't have any budget left, so they went to a model village. You have these model villages around for the tourists to come and have a look around. I don't know if you have those in Canada, but they have them sometimes in the UK. And they ended up filming at one of them and just set dressing it a bit.
That's fantastic.
It is, suddenly all of the centre of London is in the space of about 6 foot, so it's a little bit unrealistic. But they shot it at night, didn't look too bad. But it's this huge sprawling mess of a movie. I love it.
Well, I have to imagine with House of Ashes, there's what game has a greater variety of things to do? Because you're doing the desert, you're doing the caves, and then you're doing this giant alien city as a location. Right. Yeah,
it was great, and all the cave stuff as well looked absolutely amazing, with the swarming creatures and everything. So that was always great fun to work on that. And I think the last one I worked on was a game I was working on for a year, and that got pulled unfortunately after a year. But before that was The Devil in Me. And again, that was based on a relatively true story, about that hotel.
H.H. Holmes.
I mean, know all about this. Incredible sort of. But by the fact this was an actual real hotel, and they don't to this day know how many people he murdered. Yeah. But he built an entire hotel designed around disposing of people. So he built this whole hotel about getting rid of people, with all these ingenious different ways to dispatch them in the corkscrews that went up and killed them in their bed, and and lift shafts that would look like closet doors, and people would walk in and drop down, and God knows what,
Well, yes, and so I have to imagine, just given how gruesome the true story was, there's a lot you can do, like a lot that inspires you visually when you start working on Supermassive Games version of the H.H. Holmes story.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you'll be given different teams would work in different ways. Some were very beat specific. Others would be a little bit more open and say, well, how do you think this scene should work? And they were always really, and they always are really open to to talk over a scene and just say, well, I know this is the way it is at the moment, but if we did this, would that work better because of this, that, and the other? And they're like, yeah, or no, because they know 10 steps down the road that you don't, we can't do that because of this. You're like, right, okay, I'll keep quiet now. But yeah, really good fun. And then, and it makes you do a little bit of your own research into, this hotel, for instance, and the actual characters. And period stuff's always nice to work on visually, because it's not every day that you get to do a nice, sort of period piece.
Yeah, you're doing this hotel from the end of the 19th century.
Yeah, all the
architecture
all the designs
are built around.
Yeah, it's absolutely glorious. And then, from there, like I said, we went on to Quarry, which was again another year's worth of work on that, and that was so much fun. That was so much fun. Again, it was put forward in a slightly different way to some of the other projects. It was a very open brief as to what, a very open brief as to how it would go ahead, and. Basically, they would say this is what happens, kind of in this scene, and work from there. So a lot of it was, although not unscripted, is probably not quite as accurate as it was. Obviously it was scripted, but it was a lot of it was open to work through, to have these scenarios. And there was a scene in there where two of the characters are fighting off a werewolf with a big, it's like a drag hoe kind of crane,
right? The magnet in the car scene.
Yeah. And that originally there was a lot of board work on there because they were the werewolf and so on was sort of stalking them and attacked them, and one hid in a car, one hid in the crane, and the crane was being used to smash the werewolf, and this, that, and the other. And there are lots of iterations of how that scene was eventually, refined and refined and refined to what we have in the game. But I love that ability just to say, right, go nuts with this idea. What do you think? And then we'll refine it once you've given us something to look at. Because from a creative point of view, that's always much more rewarding. Because you're getting to sort of flex your chops, as it were.
That seems really fascinating. So, I guess that goes back to the importance of the storyboard, because you have writers, you have directors, you have people working on the technical side of things, and they have this idea. Right. But it would take so much time and so much effort to create a 3D mock-up of that idea. Whereas they can go to you with that idea and it's a shortcut to seeing how it could end up looking. Which in turn,
very much. Yeah. That's it. And it's, you're just doing very quick, very fast, loose. Rough-ins, yeah. To see, because from that way, the director just sits and looks through and can see how it just plays out, as you say, and it's a lot less, it's a lot less expensive than starting to do mock-ups and see how it all works, and you can see, you see what does work, what doesn't work, and there's that whole thing that a lot of the time you do something in 2D and it doesn't translate to 3D as well as you thought it did in your head, and so you start to learn the parameters that games have, because games have, it's a little bit like directing in theatre in some respects. If you've got you've got the equivalent of painted backdrops, which in TV and film were digital mattes, or matte paintings originally done on glass, and now you've got the same sort of thing with games that that don't go over there and so on, because that isn't built. So you have all these little technical things start coming in to say, well, this, don't do that because this will work, because there was on Hidden Agenda 2, there was a scene in sitting in a car with two of the guys, and that was quite a challenge because don't use reflections, which so because if you were filming it live action, you would, rather than just go pop 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 on two characters, you would start shooting from behind them and raking across, and you would shoot oblique shots, maybe part of a wing mirror, and catch someone's profile in the wing mirror as they're talking, just to break up the visuals on the dialogue to pace it. We can't do that.
Yeah, because you haven't built a whole world and a whole car. You don't have functional mirrors.
Yeah, exactly. And games don't like reflections in that respect. So you would have to. You're always sort of redefining your skill set for what it is to to work within the parameters of the various different projects, which is just fascinating because it keeps you on your toes. And you don't want to look an idiot. You work with some young geniuses like that, and then you go, well, what do we do this? And it's like, oh dear,
he doesn't get this at all.
Yes. Who is this old fellow over here? Come here, young man. So you're always learning, and it was great. And that was one of my favourite scenes. But one idea I had that I really liked, but I was in a crowd of one. When they're in the campfire scene in Quarry, there's they play spin the bottle, and I had bottle cam.
So it rotated and went from person to person to person on the ball. Oh,
and I thought it worked well on paper, probably not so much in 3D, but I thought it was a great idea. I hadn't seen it done before, but it was ultimately they said no, for reasons and so perfectly acceptable sort of thing. But I was always hoping for that in there, the bottle cam.
That's such a nice idea.
Yeah, try and get something in there.
Oh wow! All right. Now I want to ask you some questions just about the specific games. So just what challenges you faced and what parts you were particularly excited about. So let's start with Little Hope. You talked about how you did the mass family death scene.
Yes.
Right. Very quickly. So how close was your original boards? Have you seen the finished version of that sequence where everyone dies?
I have, yes. Some of it's fairly close. Some of it they pick better angles.
Right.
Basically you were told, well, this is what happens, that what happens, and sometimes you'd be trying to rein it in, saying, surely they can't have this much bad luck in one afternoon. But
it's a bad couple of minutes for that family.
Yes, we've all had days like that. Look out the window, get beheaded. So it was quite full on in that they said he needs to die here, she needs to die here. These are the variations of what's going to happen. So what would you think is the best way to get them to there? So and the character falls off the roof and
impaled on the fence.
When someone says to you, want them to go off the roof, how do you think it should go? And then you pull them off the roof, and then you show them the shot. They go, "That's great! Land them on spikes." you think, "I'm in heaven here," in a bizarre sort of way, because you're just like kids in a candy shop. How can we do this? And the staircase is on fire now. Now this should land on them, So it was quite an intense sort of few days of just trying to work it out, and also you don't want it to look silly.
Yeah.
So you're trying to keep it real, to use the term, and little things like when your character's on the roof and he's slipping because it's snowy and everything. That's a real time fear because we've all slipped in places we don't want to slip. So an audience can equate to that, and then on over they go, and then wham. Obviously you can't associate quite so much
that part, but it's a very relatable. It's a very relatable fear. Just trying to navigate, a slippery surface and just the worst case scenario happening. Because that's also how she breaks her neck on the. That was a more uncomfortable scene to work on, because in the original board, I'm not sure how it ended up in the original game, but in the boards you see a close up of her ankle on the side of the icy balcony, and she slips, and then we cut to the young fella sort of looking up and reacting, and then we cut to the scarf that she had just pulling tight through frame, and you get a horrible crack. And that was enough, for that. I think you actually see it in the game because you can get away with it more. So the boards were like a trampoline to bounce ideas from. So that was great. So it's some of what you see gets in, some what you doesn't. It evolves and progresses as the parameters of the game are sort of layered in. The farther you progress down, So other than that opening, did you have a favorite part of Little Hope to do? Something with the monsters, something with maybe something with the abandoned town?
Yeah, well, I do like the whole thing with the abandoned town. What I really liked as well was the sort of going back to the sort of witch trials and all that. 'Cause it's a fascinating part of history visually. So when the young girl's been accused of witchcraft and she's in that sort of tavern, and the judge, who are based on Christopher Lee, is banging his gavel, and the fire starts up, the grate gets pushed over the fire and all that. That was really nice, because it was really rich and atmospheric. A lot of sort of visual references there to look into, to make sure that it was representative of what we were going to find. Doing the monsters is always great fun, because again the team are really receptive to, okay, we got this creature that's got spikes sticking through it and everything. It's going to be horrendous to see, so let's hold off seeing it.
Yeah. And the game is very coy with that particular creature. There is a lot of him back in the shadows, and him just kind of creeping around and dragging those railing spikes around. Yeah,
well, the art director on there was I don't know if I can say anyone's name, but he's a genius. Yeah. And a genuinely lovely bloke. They all are, just blow my mind, they really do. But he was always saying, hear the sound of these scraping spikes on the ground before we see anything, because that would great ratchet up the tension and everything. And when you do see the characters, the monsters, they're so horrific.
Yeah.
And there's a scene with them in the church, and I directly lifted from a 1980 film called The Fog. And not all my references are old. Yeah, not all my references are old, but they did make some very good films back then. There is a remake of The Fog from
2005 or 6 or something. Yeah.
Yes, and it's
Tom Welling. It's terrible.
Possibly probably the worst film I've ever seen. Yeah. And I've seen some right turkeys. But the original Fog it's brilliant. But there's a whole scene at the end in the church, and you don't really see anything, apart from arms punched through windows and bits and pieces like that. But that was very much a reference point to go to, because we know all you do is plagiarize, which is a very polite way of saying steal. You get these sort of fresh ideas, but then you suddenly realize you peel back the layers of that onion of thought, and you think, oh, that's where I got the idea from. But it was great fun. But the monsters in there, I thought, were absolutely unique and really generally creepy. And
that game has some exquisite monster design.
Yeah,
I don't know why. The one I was always obsessed with was the hanging lady, where the rope just disappears off into the sky, and she's just kind of drifting along after people. That's very intense.
It is. It's beautifully creepy, isn't it? I mean, the another one that seen in there that was actually quite fun and was done quite a few times to get it right. Actually, was the bus crash.
Really?
Yeah, we had various different ways to do that. Originally, it was, if memory serves, it was going to be a reverse tracking shot. So looking back at the bus as if we were in another vehicle looking back. And the bus slides and skids and sort of stays at the same speed as the camera coming backwards. So an awesome sort of slide like that. But it sort of got chopped and changed because there are various things that you can and can't do, And so it was great. It was good fun, and it was a lot of sort of collaborative, bouncing ideas back and forward, and really good fun. And I worked remotely on most of the SMG stuff, so I was working from home, and then obviously Skyping and Zoom and Teams and all the other ways. Just like this, to do it. So it was great, because you sort of got as much feedback as you needed, and if you didn't need any, you didn't get any. It's like, well, okay, leave you these, and then you say, you happy with them? Yeah, nothing to change, fine. And other times there would be, like I said, because it is just this collaborative process. It's like, this is what we want. What do you think? You set it out. Show them, and this works, that doesn't. And that's the real fun of it. Because it is, although you are a lot of the time you're just sitting there drawing away by yourself, it's a real team process. I can't really take credit for any one particular idea, because you're all working to get the best out of a scene. And because games now, when I first started back in the year 1257 in games, there was films and games were very different things, very different formats, whereas over the years they've crossed over now, and we've had our first movies made of games and vice versa, and so it's the process of filmmaking and game making is very, very similar, whereas it used to have its own disciplines. So it's great fun. And
okay. So House of Ashes, is there anything you recall from the development of the House of Ashes storyboards? Anything you found particularly challenging, a scene you just loved?
Well, there was there's a scene where a person sort of basically gets mass attacked in the cave by all these bats, and that was quite a lot of work there, because there were hundreds of bats in any one of the panels, and they're all flying and whooshing and this, and that went through quite a few different iterations. My favourite bit, now I don't know if it ends up in the game or not, is there was a scene where one of the soldiers grabs a spike and goes running towards one of the vampires, and then basically slides between his legs, and as he comes out the other side in one sort of camera move and gets up, the creature turns around and it's got his spike sticking out of its stomach. Then it falls forward and gravity does the rest of the work by pushing the spike up through the thing's gut. You know, so it was all things like that. And again, working with the directors on there, they're like, yeah, go for it, you know.
Well, how different is the job? It's a much more action-intensive game than anything else Supermassive does. So how different is it boarding those kinds of action sequences compared to the horror you do in a lot of the others?
Yeah, well, I mean, you tend to approach everything with the same mindset as what can I get from this scene to bring it out and make it the most exciting. So there's a lot more camera movement in there. You're having a lot, you know, you're not having to build up tension in some of the scenes there, because it's all out there and people are facing off on this, that and the other. So you're basically trying to make it interesting, because one of the strange things about when you're doing action, and it sounds like a misnomer, but trying to keep it interesting, because action, if it's badly directed, can become very boring very quickly.
Yeah.
And I've always been an advocate of, if you've got a huge project with two massive opposing armies all fighting each other, like that, an audience won't relate to that too much, because the biggest war is fought by smaller battles.
Right.
And so even in a huge, you know, deluge of things crashing, it's the individual story that will link the audience to the narrative. Because you don't care if you just see 8,000 pixels having a whack at each other, you know, in one big wide shot, you know.
Yeah.
So you try and make it about the characters, and you have as much fun as you can, because they'll say, you know, right, he's going to start firing off to the left, and this will cause this to happen, and then this will cause something to come from behind him, so we need you to work this out. And so it becomes very frenetic, and you do tend to work at the speed of what you're portraying to a certain extent. If you're doing a slow build-up scene, you're still working quickly because it's part of your job. But if you're doing the frenetic stuff, the really fast-paced stuff, you tend to do that much quicker, because you're playing that scene in your head, and you want what your eye camera is seeing down as fast as you can, so you don't lose the thread or the beat of that particular piece of action, you know. So you tend to plow through stuff and plow through it like that, and then send it over and, you know, come back with, you know, that's cool, let's change this, that's a terrible idea, how did you ever get work, you know, that sort of thing. So again, it's all collaboration. It's really good fun.
Okay, so Devil and Me, or Architects of Murder, right? That one, what kind of a process was that? And you said it seems like, unlike the rest of them, that seemed to have been most based on a real life incident and real life location. So was that more research intensive for you for the visuals?
It was, but there was a slightly different way, different approach to that one, which was you were given. It was very shot specific. So you weren't sort of given there wasn't an overriding script to read as such. You were given detailed points of what happens in certain parts of the story, and you would work from there. And it could be a little bit disjointed. So your first day, you might be working stuff that happens at the end, and then pausing halfway through that day to work on something that's happening 2/3 of the way through the beginning. But it's a branch off of what's already happened somewhere else. So it was trying to keep an overall track of that one was a little bit harder, because it's a very nuanced piece, but there's a lot going on. And whereas usually I'd be working for like a year on a game before other boarders would come in and do bits and pieces on it, and sort of show me up. That one was it was spread over a team already, so it was harder in some respects to get an overall arc of how it was going to be at the end, and your work was going straight into their system, as opposed to sending them pages of boards as you do normally. So it's a slightly different way of working, and it was their system and very effective. But you have to sort of adjust your headspace to it as such. So you're not getting an overall. You'll be being given part of a scene, and then branch offs from that scene, but you don't necessarily have a context for that scene.
Okay.
So you would. So so there was a lot of visual reference to look up on the history of the place, because you want to get the vibe of the whole place. So it was slightly different in that respect. And again, that has its fresh challenges, because it's a different way of working, and that's all a positive.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Because you're having to adapt. And
did you have a scene in that you particularly enjoyed?
I had a chase up on the rooftop.
Okay.
And she was hiding in some. I don't know if he's got into the end game, but the bowler-hatted killer is sort of stalking her, and she's hiding in these
lockers.
Lockers, that's it.
Yeah, no, that's in the game.
That is in the game. I haven't had a chance to play that one. And I must admit, that was a really nice scene. I know it's not the most exciting possible scene, but it was a lot of build-up attention, and there were lots of variants off of that. Yeah. So, one of the things that didn't go in the game, which I would have liked to have seen, was she falls against a rusty railing, and it breaks away and collapses. But although it's actually been done quite a few times now, then I assure you I hadn't seen it that often, which is the camera would go over with her, so she would stay roughly the same position in frame, but
and the whole camera would rotate with
her, and the world would spin around her. And I thought that would be a lovely way to get someone hanging off a railing.
Yeah.
But there are various parameters. But you can get a stunt performer to do that and harness them to it. But when you're doing it CGI, they've actually got to move their hand positions around. So
technically,
yeah. So it's you could see them sort of shaking their heads, going, "No, that's not going to work like that." So a different approach was used. But that was one of my favourite scenes in there, just because it was. There was a fair bit going on there, and it was a build-up of tension and and all that, and lots of shadow play and misdirection.
Oh, that is what that game is about. Like there is a lot of just creepy fake outs in that game, and all of the use of the eerie mannequins.
Yes, they are creepy, aren't they?
Yeah. All of those mannequins that he made with human flesh.
Yes. Was it Bundy who was the one that they based Texas Chainsaw? That's it. Thank you. Based Texas Chainsaw Massacre on, didn't they?
Yeah, there's a little bit of that in there.
Yeah, right, having a lampshade with a tattoo on it was a giveaway.
Jesus. So the Quarry. The Quarry, was it a very different experience working on the Quarry than working on a Dark Pictures game?
Yeah, it was. The director on there is I've gone to do other things with, and he's brilliant because he has a different approach, which is he has an overall idea. He has all of the channels, all of it worked out, but he'll give you the bare bones and go from there. So it's not you're not wasting time by going off on a tangent.
Okay.
He'll steer you in the right direction, but you have a lot of freedom with those to play with the scene. Make it as creepy as possible, build it up. I mean, there's a scene with a couple in the woods that I thought of American Werewolf in London when they're on the moors, and we have misdirection, and then one of them gets wiped out by a werewolf. And if any of your viewers haven't seen American Werewolf in London, then that's a plot spoiler. The film's 40 years old, so if you haven't seen it by now...
40 years old, and that happens in the first 10 minutes. I think we're fine.
Yeah, we'll be all right. And if you haven't seen it, watch it. It's brilliant. It's being remade, I believe, at the moment, which is...
weird choice.
By the director's son of the original. Okay. So I'm open to see that. But there was a lot of have a go at this scene and see what you come up with on Quarry. Yeah. And because the script as well is developing as you're working on it, you don't know what's going to be going on to a certain extent. You're learning as the script is progressed, because it's you're basically, the script is here and you're like Pac-Man catching up with the writers as you know yourself. It's like, right.
Okay, we've completely changed what this scene is about. There's now 3 different characters in this scene. It's set in a new location, but it's effectively the same scene. Go redraw everything.
Yeah, that's the one. Oh, you were there, yeah. but it was really good fun because it's one of those we were saying before we went on air that this is an industry based on serendipity, and luck and chance and circumstances, and it's like personally I'd always wanted to work on a zombie film, and I never did, but I got Carmageddon, so.
Carmageddon, the zombie card game where you're driving around the world running over zombies.
Yeah, so that was the nearest I got to it, and that was great fun. And I would always wanted to work on a werewolf movie, but we don't tend to make many werewolf movies in the UK. I mean, Dog Soldiers was the last one.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, I mean, and American Werewolf before that, which was 1980 or something or other. Yeah. So we didn't make them. So the chances of me getting a werewolf movie, I will say, was slim. But then
over 25 years, I'd say that was pretty slim.
That's it. If I get to 80, I should have worked on one. But they said, here's a game. Do you want to work on it? So they always ask, and they know you're going to say yes because
of course.
The project are always really cool. This looks good. No, thank you. So I thought, go for it, and it was a joy for a year. It literally was just a year. And again, you talked about
the junkyard scene. And the fire pit. Is there any other scene that you either found particularly challenging or you just adored drawing?
Well, there's a scene where they find the sort of mutant werewolf, and in the boards it's found the remains of an old sort of carnival, and he's got entrails growing out of him and everything. Now I don't know if that eventually got into the film.
You mean the finale where he's been shot and they find him in his old...
Yeah. That whole scene, that was exploring this quite Alice in Wonderland style scene. The visuals, this old, from 1930s, 40s, whatever it was, just broken up carny kind of village that they discovered and all that. So visually that was lovely and really offsetting an uncanny valley creepy kind of way, and that was really good fun to work with. But there were so many scenes in that. I mean, my favourite scene, as we said, was the one with the werewolf in the wrecked cars and all that, and going for it. But there were so many scenes in that were just so much fun. When they're all hiding and arguing in the cabin by the pool and everything, and they got the body in the pool, which I thought was brave because that's a tricky one to do, And so there were so many scenes in that were just fun, but there were literally tens of thousands of boards and so many scenes that you do tend to forget a few of them after.
Of course.
But there was a whole in the tree houses, a whole werewolf chasing around in the tree houses and all that.
The tree house and the zip line and all of that.
I mean, when I was doing that scene, I was having shades of an old movie. Called Nightbreed, Clive Barker's.
Oh, Nightbreed's amazing.
It's lovely, isn't it? That could do with a remake, actually. That could do with a remake. Because it's very soundstage orientated, so it could look wider. But they've got the village of all the rope crossings.
All of the rope bridges going in Midian,
Midian, and so that was some inspiration there for the whole werewolf chase, and using the rope bridges and falling from one level to the other and everything. And so many things, escaping in the canoe and hiding off. There was I loved when the young couple are in the store and they search around. He's goofing about and they find the bloody sort of backpack and they go on all that. Although that's probably not the most exciting part of the game. Again, that was you're having to make something relatively mundane, which is two kids goofing about in the back of a shop, and try and keep an audience attention, with the playability and everything. And so that was really good fun to work on. And there were just so many bits on that. And I was getting paid to draw werewolves. I mean,
what could be better?
I know, result.
Well, yeah. I mean, on your website, you've got a wonderful take on the scene where the American Werewolf in London scene, where they're being chased through the woods and then one of them just gets tackled out of the way. Yeah. It ended up very different in the game, which
didn't it? Yeah.
It did. I will say this, though, and this is the big question. This is the thing I'm most curious about. Were you there, when they switched the design of the werewolves, or did that happen after you were already done?
The werewolf sort of, it wasn't an overnight switch. They were sort of. I don't think by the end of it they were even classed as werewolves. I think they were called.
Well, they're still werewolves. I mean,
I would say
it's a full moon. You know, they get bitten. They're killed by silver. Like they're still werewolves. It's just they don't have fur.
Yeah, well, I think that was a practicality thing.
Really?
It's much easier. I think it's just much easier to model a creature without fur than it is. With fur. I mean, I don't know that one. I wasn't in the meeting with it.
Okay.
But the designs did change slightly, and
over
then
the course of over
a course of a period, and then a final design came out that was quite different to the other ones. But you could see that the way that it was heading, you know, you weren't just sort of sent an email saying, "Oh, by the way, this is it," and it's completely different. You know, it was heading in that direction, and then a further one came along, and I thought they looked great and creepy.
They are singularly odd. Because you're seeing I mean, if you look at the body shape, they are clearly werewolves. They've got the backwards knees, they've got the dog faces, but you're just seeing them without skin. It is quite unnerving to look at them. Yeah,
I mean, I sort of in the boards, because not all the designs have been finished by then. I based the werewolves from the Howling movie, the first one, not the
great
terrible
werewolves in that first one.
Brilliant, aren't they? There's a talk about a ratchet scene of tension. There's a scene where in the Howling where it's all volumetric slats of lighting coming through this office window, and it's at night, and this girl's going through a filing cabinet trying to find out some secrets. And in a close-up, she puts her hand on this file and pulls it out of the cabinet. And as she does, this massive werewolf claw just very gently plucks it out of her hand. And I thought that is the perfect juxtaposition for a werewolf movie. So I sort of based as much as I could on the werewolf designs from that movie. And, you know, they didn't necessarily have to smash everything up as well. They're capable of...
such delicacy.
Yeah. And it was great fun, but, you know, the final design, as you say, was quite different. But, you know, still worked.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
well, honestly, I know it's weird to say, but maybe and this is the thing that my own personal question I had to ask is, what were the game has what might be my favorite werewolf transformation ever, which is just a person is standing there, they're feeling sick, and then all of the skin explodes off their body and there's a werewolf.
Yes.
Did it look like that when you were doing the boards and they were traditional werewolves, or was it a different transformation kind of thing?
Originally it was a more traditional transformation scene. Again, hiding it in light, hiding it in shadow.
Right.
So they would be staggering through shadows and changing between from the dark to the light and going from there. But I thought the twist with and there they are. It's great, isn't it?
It is. It's my favorite.
I do
part
wonder
of the game.
sometimes if that again is a way of hiding a multitude of sins in some respects. It might be much easier to make them do that quickly rather than revert to various different models that have got to be blended.
You're constantly, and you have to do all these shots of the models blending and shaping. You're worried. And now here it's literally just, you got Nick's model, you load in a cloud of blood and gore, and then while the cloud of blood and gore is there, you swap in the werewolf model. I mean, it's just...
bang.
You're right. It could just be a technical solution, but it's so audacious.
Yeah, and it's really unusual, isn't it? Because it takes you by surprise, and it's even
the first time you see it. Yeah,
it's a very violent act as well. Just to bang, and you got a sheet of blood, and my asthma of red over you going. What's that? You know, by the time your vision's cleared, there's something on you. You know,
werewolf right in front of you.
Yeah, I mean.
So yeah, that was a much later after you were done with the project development.
Yeah, definitely.
It worked out great. It
did. You know, the weird thing is because you know, if you work on a TV show, it could be like 3 or 4 months after you've worked on it that it's hit Netflix.
Yeah.
With the film, it could be like, I mean, I did Paddington 3 last summer, Paddington in Peru. That was all the way over summer, but that won't be released till this Christmas.
Right.
Whereas, you know, you work on a game and it can be 2 years from when you worked on it before you see anything. You know. So it's always a pleasant surprise, because sometimes you're sitting there thinking, "Oh yeah, I remember that." You know, because between then you've worked on, you know,
so many other things,
you know, tens of thousands of boards for another game, you know. But I always the Dark Pictures anthology and so on will always hold a special place, you know, because it's just a special place, you know, and great projects. And I hope that many more projects like that come out, because they're great to play, they're, you know, great to work on. And it's werewolves as well, and demons, and all the sort of things that twist the mind.
Serial killers and monsters and aliens.
Exactly.
Anything you can imagine, they can drop into those.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, what's not to like?
They might be working on a zombie game right now. I mean, that's.
Yeah, well,
and you did get almost zombies with the walking around corpses in. You got the shambling corpse versions of the vampires in House of Ashes.
That's true. Yeah,
almost a zombie.
Almost a zombie. Yeah. Okay. I'll have that. That sounds fun.
Well, speaking of going forward, what are you working on right now? If you could, anything you can talk about, obviously, because you've got Paddington 3 coming up. What else? What else is in the horizon for you?
Well, on the horizon, there's Red King. I worked on after that. That's coming out later this year on Netflix, I think. Mm-hmm. We've got I've got 2 short films I've just been working on, 2 horrors. And one is being pitched to developers for full production, so that's quite exciting. And there's the usual sort of raft of commercials and bits and pieces like that, and an action film coming up. Once things pick up a little bit with the industry, it's a little bit shaky at the moment, but that's all slated to sort of go ahead in the next few months. So there's plenty to sort of keep ticking over, and keep going. And so it's all good. It's all exciting, especially when you see a short film get expanded on and into a bigger one, and you see where this what they can get away with in 15 minutes, and suddenly you can suddenly expand that out to a full
whole world.
So it's all exciting stuff. And I must admit, I'm just glad to be working. People still hire me to colour in, which is basically what I do for a living. Oddly enough. But so that's in the immediate future.
Right.
And commercials and things like that, which are sort of bread and butter and always good fun. Although most of the time I never actually see the commercials when they're on.
Well, it still pays. That's what's important.
Well, yeah, that's it. There are no scruples when it comes to adverts. You do anything,
Job is a job.
A job is a job, yeah.
All right, so thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks for saying hello. It's been great fun.
Yeah, and honestly, maybe there'll be more work with Supermassive to talk to you about in the future. Fingers crossed on that one, huh?
Yeah, hope so. They're too good to go. They're brilliant. So all positive thoughts, I think.
And I'm going to suggest everybody drop by your website, which is Neil Maguire Art, where you can see a huge, you have volumes of storyboards.
I do, yeah. www.neil-maguire.com will get you straight to it. And there's loads of stuff on there. And I am updating it. I'm putting the Devil in Me on there.
Boards.
Yeah, I think it's because there were thousands of them, tens of thousands.
So you got to pick just the right ones.
Yeah, I've got to sort through them all, and they're all in separate folders, which is so exciting.
Yeah. I remember seeing in one of the making ofs on there your boards of the eye coming out of the head, and then them picking up the eyeball with the nerve attached to it.
Yeah, it's always good fun, and there were heads in the fridge and all that,
Oh God,
just a regular weekend at home, really.
Oh, all right. Thank you so much, and I look forward to checking out The Devil in Me. That should be fantastic.
Yeah,
we'll see you soon, and thanks everybody for watching.
Lovely.
And,
thank you, everyone.
We'll see you soon.
Cheers, Dan.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.